Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our presentation of the First Picture Shows, Historic Movie Houses of Austin. My name is Mike Miller. I'm the manager of the Austin History Center. Before we begin our program, I want to take a moment to thank a couple groups that helped make this night possible. I want to thank the Austin Theater Alliance, who allowed us graciously to use this wonderful theater, the Historic State Theater, now called Stateside at the Paramount, for our event. And they were gracious enough to provide this venue for us for free. So I encourage everybody to So I just want to encourage everybody to go frequent the snack bar to make it worth their while for them. I also want to take a moment to thank the Austin History Center Association. They're the friends and support group for the Austin History Center, and without their support and assistance, programs like this could not happen. They do have a booth out in the lobby, so I'd like to encourage everyone at the end of the program, or if you go out in the middle of the program to get your coffee or beer, to visit the table, pick up a free copy of a newsletter. You can inquire about membership information. And if you are one of the 40 who RSVP'd to the director of the association, you can pick up your free DVD at that table as well. The Movie Houses exhibit at the center it's kind of a different exhibit for us to do, and one that we are extremely proud to have done. Movies are something that touches everybody in different ways, but everybody has some type of movie experience and movie memory, and oftentimes those experiences and memories are tied directly to the places where we see movies. And that was the story that we had tried to tell, and hopefully we're successful in telling through our exhibit. But since we are here in this historic theater, and a little bit about this theater, the State Theater was built in 1935. It was the first theater built by the Interstate Theater Circuit in Austin. They managed the Paramount, the Queen, and the Capitol Theater, which used to be the Hancock Theater, but this was the first one that they actually specifically built in Austin for Austin theater goers. But since we're here and we can't see the exhibit, our exhibits designer and I decided to create a short little film so y'all can kind of get a glimpse of what's at the exhibit at the History Center and to kind of set the mood for the panel discussion that will come in just a minute. So if you can cue the movie. Thank you. And that film is just a brief glimpse of all the great images and stories that you can learn about at the History Center. The exhibit will be up through August 19th, and so if you've not had a chance to come by and see it, I certainly invite you to come do so. One last point I want to mention, that song that was played, the I Want to Go, that was a song that was written in 1916, and it was written specifically for the dedication of the Paramount Theatre next door. And I will make a quick plug. The performer of that piece was actually my brother up in Denton, who has a recording studio in his second bedroom, and he recorded that for us. It's good to have friends in low places. At this time, I'll go ahead and get on with the meat of the program. We're going to have a wonderful panel discussion, and then following the panel discussion, we'll have another film from our film vault called Austin, the Friendly City, to show you later. But at this time, I'd like to bring up our Curator of Archives and Manuscripts, Susan Rittereiser, who will introduce the panelists and moderate the discussion. And if the panelists can come up and take your seats at the same time. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mike. You hear me out there? Oh, yeah. I can hear me. Lots of paper up here. Welcome, everyone. Yeah. Great. Can I just all right. Yeah. All right. Howdy. You all know who I am and what I do, more or less, at the Austin History Center. Several months ago, get my hair out of my face. Several months ago, I had the privilege of serving on the exhibits team responsible for creating the First Movie Houses exhibit, currently running at the Austin History Center. This past April, I had an even greater privilege, the privilege of moderating the exhibit's opening panel discussion on Austin's historic movie houses. Because audience response to that event was so overwhelmingly positive, and because we just had such a blast doing it, we have decided to reprise the panel discussion this evening with the original cast of characters, plus one more. There was originally supposed to be two. He, unfortunately, is not here with us this evening, John Bernardoni. Be that as it may, this time we decided to do the panel discussion in a much larger venue, and wouldn't you know it, an historic movie house venue to boot, the lovely State Theater, now known as Stateside at the Paramount, which you see around you. So, we have one panelist this evening, but before I introduce all four panelists to you, I would like to say that I really am absolutely thrilled to have them here this evening to share their stories of these very special places with us. All of our guests, as you may have guessed, all have very strong ties to Austin's historic movie house scene in one way or another. So without further ado, please allow me to introduce them to you, starting with our newest panelist member, that is Steve Wilson. He is there in the green. I'm going to give you a little background now on each of our panelists. Steve is the curator of the film collection at the Harry Ransom Center at the University of Texas at Austin. He has degrees in English and radio, television, and film, and worked for several years as a manager at the Varsity Theater and later at the Paramount, which I did not know. Wilson has worked at the Ransom Center since 1992 and served as curator of the film collection since 2002. In that capacity, he has negotiated the acquisition of several archives, including the Robert De Niro collection, the Paul Schrader collection, and the Nicholas Ray collection. He also curated several exhibitions, most recently Making Movies, which was really great, and served as project director of numerous film preservation projects, including the films of Norman Bel Geddes, which will be included in a major exhibition this fall. Wilson's next exhibition will celebrate the 75th anniversary of Gone with the Wind. Awesome, I can't wait. Let's start closest to me now, here, Mr. Jay Podolnick, born and raised in Austin. Grew up in an entertainment-oriented family. Jay's grandfather, Louis Novi, a Russian immigrant who originally came to Austin in 1917, became manager of the Hancock Opera House in 1918. During the 1930s and 40s, Novi managed Interstate Theater Corporation's Austin-based theaters, which included the Capitol, as the Hancock Opera House was renamed, the State, the Paramount, the Varsity, and the Queen. In 1952, the year Jay was born, Jay's grandfather, Louis, along with his daughter, Lena, and son-in-law, Earl, founded Trans-Texas Theaters, which owned theaters across the state, Austin, Dallas, Denton, El Paso, Wichita Falls, and Fort Worth. The company's early Austin acquisitions included the Queen, the Texas, the Capitol, and the Capitol. During the 1960s and 70s, Trans-Texas added the Chief Drive-In, the Americana, the Aquarius 4, the city's first fourplex, and the Southwood. And as you just saw in the little film there, that's the Blazer tag now down on Ben White. The Podolnicks were among the first to integrate movie houses in Texas. The company was sold in 1979 to AMC, American Multi-Cinema. Jay's entertainment career, fostered by his parents and grandparents, had been primarily in the music business as a recording artist, music producer, engineer, and as a touring musician. More recently, Jay's primary focus has been the Villamuse Project, an innovative media venture encompassing both production and distribution facilities for film, television, commercials, video games, animation. It does it all. Awesome. Next, we have Mr. Jim Maloy. Veteran projectionist, 90 years old? Is that it, Jim? You're 90? 91? 91? Yeah. Jim worked as a projectionist in town for over 35 years. During World War II, he ran a film library overseas for the U.S. Army. While on a 30-day leave from military service in 1945, he volunteered to work at the North Austin Drive-In. That was Austin's first drive-in theater for the local 205. That is the union, the local union, International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, Moving Picture Technicians, and Artists. That's what they call it, ITSE, I think, for short. Soon after, he joined the union. Later that same year, he was released from military service and worked his first job as a union apprentice for 1 week at the Cactus Theater on East 6th Street. That was one run by Richard Skinny Pryor. You'll recall that was the father of local broadcaster Cactus Pryor. Following that stint, he was assigned the vacation shift, meaning he would alternate working between various union theaters in town for 2 weeks at a time. He eventually landed a job at the Austin Theater on South Congress, built by ITC and opened in 1939, and worked there for 17 years. His last job was working as a projectionist at the Southwood off of Ben White for the Podolnick's Trans-Texas Theaters. Welcome. And last but not least, John Stewart, another native Austinite in the house. Some of his earliest toys were projectors of some kind. As soon as he was old enough to walk to the Austin Theater by himself, he spent many hours there on the weekends visiting Jim Maloy in the projection booth. In his words, that was his happy place. After leaving the Air Force in 1971, he returned to Austin in 1972 and became a member of the local 205, that union I just told you about. Over the next 5 years, he worked as a projectionist at nearly all the union houses in town, including the Ritz, the Texas, the Varsity, the State, the Paramount, the Americana, Southwood, Fox, Capitol Plaza, Burnett and Chief Drive-Ins. He also worked live shows at the old Palmer Auditorium, remember that place? And in the 16mm film library owned by the Maloys. In 1988 to 2000, he worked at the Highland 10, the Barton Creek 5, and the Great Hills 8. Around the year 2000, John became the projectionist for the Paramount and has been there ever since. He is among the last of his kind in town. There are just a handful, not even a handful of actual projectionists left, because most of the theaters have now converted to digital. Welcome, welcome, gentlemen. Okay. Too much paper. Let's go back here. So briefly about the format for this evening's panel discussion. I'd like it to be organic and conversational in nature, much like the first one we did. Anyway, that's the goal. So I will ask a panelist or panelists a question. They'll answer it, and then I'll take one or two responses, feedback, questions, follow-up, whatever, from the audience. If I feel like we're getting bogged down at any point, I'll direct the attention accordingly. Please don't take that personally if I have to do that. All right. First question, question number one. I'm going to paint a really broad brushstroke here. Could each of you share your favorite Austin movie theater-related story or experience with us? Starting with the newer panelists, Steve.
My favorite?
Your favorite Austin movie theater-related story or experience?
Oh, God, there's a lot. Oh, hold the mic, okay. Well, the things that come to mind are specific things. The one that pops in my mind first was when we were showing Napoleon at the Varsity. This was the reconstructed silent film by Abel Gance, and we were showing it in the upstairs theater. And I was walking through just to make sure. I loved the movie and just thought it was wonderful. And I was walking through just to check the picture and check the temperature and all of that. And there was a mother with two kids on the back row, and they were probably 8 or 9 years old, and they were just enwrapped with this silent movie, and that really stuck with me all this time. That movies can be so powerful and last so long, and still after 75 years still get that kind of attention. That's the thing that comes to my mind. Otherwise, there's a lot of stories about people, the people we worked with, and things that happened. But as far as a movie theater experience, that's the thing that jumps to my mind, is a great
Awesome.
movie and a great audience.
Yeah. Anyone, guys? Jay?
Well, unfortunately, my favorite experience at a theater I can't talk about.
Nice.
Being honest.
How about your second favorite experience?
Well, that too.
Oh, geez. Oh, boy.
You know,
It's starting off this
when
way,
it works.
huh?
But my favorite memory in the theaters was not seeing a film at all. It was actually, I remember when I was a baby, and my grandfather his office was next door at the Paramount, and I remember crawling on the floor, and as a baby, and there's a few memories, that you have that just kind of stick in your mind, and that's one of them. And I think that was probably my greatest experience in a movie house, is to be able to remember that. Because I literally grew up in the theater business. Louis was, like you said, he was in the business from the 20s till the 50s, until his passing. And so I guess that's my most memorable experience, except for my number one or two.
Oh,
And one
third
of the-
ain't bad.
I
you
think
know?
I may hold the record for seeing Dr. Zhivago more than anybody on the planet.
Wow.
Because I was an usher at the Americana Theater when it was playing.
Okay.
And so I think I probably saw it more than 100 times, 120 times, something like that.
So
which
that- it
was
was-
great to me. It was interesting every time.
So it wasn't about Julie Christie then? Because I've heard that said to me before.
Pardon me?
It wasn't about Julie Christie then? Seeing Julie Christie, the actress, Dr. Zhivago. Never mind.
You know, it
Never
just brought childhood memories to me. You know, seeing Zhivago. That was a joke.
All right, next. Anybody? Jim? John? Jim, what's your favorite movie, Austin-related movie experience you'd like to share with us? Yeah.
I spent 3 years, a year and a half as number 2 projectionist in theater number 2 in Cheyenne, Wyoming, Fort Warren. And next thing I knew, I was in Tunisia. And they put me in charge of a B-24 hangar downtown. And I stayed there 8 or 9 months, and I went to Bari, Italy, and reopened a film library there. That was my first real big, basic commercial daylight. We showed training films all day at the theater, and then 2 shows at night. Then overseas training films as well as entertainment. After I got back and had some children, my oldest son worked at the Varsity, and my youngest son worked at the Austin Theater, where I spent 17 years. And my daughter, when she was in high school, she came down here and worked the ladies' vacations at the ticket booth between the Paramount and the State all summer. And it made me feel, you know, real good to think that they could find a place and they could do the job. And I was real proud of them.
All right,
Anyway,
yeah. Okay,
and, then one year,
okay, there's more. There's more.
the business agent calls me and says, "You off Monday and Tuesday, right?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Well, why don't you go down to the City Auditorium and be chief electrician for this big musical show?" Well, it was, you know, picking up $20, $30 on your day off, so sure. So I went down, and the truck backed in, and they had a carpenter, they had a sound man, they had a truck driver, but there was no electrician. And one of the men that was with the show said, "Harry here has been with the show for 12 years, and he can tell you what to do." And I couldn't figure out why they didn't have an electrician, but he had had a heart attack in Dallas the day before.
Oh, my goodness.
And so the truck driver told me what to do, and we got the show put up and got the show done. Fred Waring and half 100 Pennsylvanians. And we're taking the show down, and Mr. Waring and then this other gentleman who was kind of a director came over, and I thought, well, what did I do wrong? You know, the boss generally doesn't come running over. And Mr. Waring says, "James," I don't know where he got my name, he said, "We lost our electrician last night, and will you join us tomorrow in Dallas, in Fort Worth?" You know, it was a shock. And I said, "Well, I have to get an okay from not only my union, but also from New York to go on the road." So anyway, I spent the best part of the next 2 years with Fred Waring and half 100 Pennsylvanians. And I loved every minute of the road show, and the pay was out of this world.
All right. Awesome. Thank you, Jim. John?
Well, my memory is not quite as elaborate as that, but you know, the big deal for me was watching movies in the front yard of our house. My brother had a friend that would bring a projector over, and I remember us watching The Egg and I remember the title. I don't remember anything about the film, but the title is pretty memorable. And then there was the night that I sat in the backyard watching a print of The Birds by myself. My parents were such
gosh.
chickens
Wow.
and didn't like movies, and so I sat out there and watched The Birds by myself. I don't like grackles.
Go figure. Thank you. Awesome. All right, on to our next question. This is for Steve, who, as you already know, was a manager at the Varsity Theater for quite some time. The Varsity was on the drag. I'm going to give you a little bit of background. I think you already got some, but this theater opened in 1936, and it shut its doors in 1990. After doing business for 50 years, ITC built the Varsity in 1936, and a little bit of kind of cool, funky trivia here. It opened with the film The Texas Rangers, November 20th, 1936. This film was directed by King Vidor, if any of you remember, and was based on the Walter Prescott Webb's book by the same name. Governor James Allred had a cameo appearance and served as the guest director in this movie by telephone for one scene. He was the guest of honor at the premiere, too, of course. The Varsity was designed solely as a movie house with no other intended use, by the way, which some of them can't say that. A lot of them can't say that. Anyway, that's a little bit of funky trivia I wanted to share with y'all. If you're interested in reading more about the Varsity, please come to the exhibit because we talk a lot about more about it there. Anyway, back to Steve and his question. So, how long were you the manager of the Varsity?
I was there almost exactly 10 years, from May of 1980 to May of 1990.
That was quick. All right, moving on.
I didn't know that.
So, I mean, you were basically there when it closed.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
yeah, yeah.
it closed on your watch.
That's right.
What was it like? What was it like having this iconic 50-year-old movie theater close on your watch?
Oh, it was terrible and wonderful at the same time. It was terrible because we were losing a real landmark and a place that was really close to a lot of people's hearts. The last week that it was open, there were just a constant stream of people coming in to see the theater for the last time, to give their condolences, and you know, just it was a sad time. You came. In fact, I think you came. Yeah, everybody here came.
I did.
You didn't?
I was out of town.
That's right. But it was sad. A lot of people were really affected by that, and during that last week, a lot of people came in and told stories about how they had been proposed to at that theater, or had some kind of experience like Jay had, you know, wherever he had. Or lots of people came in to tell
unspeakable
stories.
Experiences.
And it really brought out the fact that a great theater is not just about the movies that play, but it's about the place and about gathering people. So and that really came to the fore during those last few days.
Yeah, please.
I'd like to add something to that. That, to me, the most fascinating part of tonight's discussion should not only be about the movie houses, but the characters that were behind the screen that owned and ran these movie houses. Students that worked here as ushers, State and the Paramount, the Americana, all the other theaters, and who sold sodas and popcorn, and particularly what my father really loved about being in the theater business was he loved the union. He loved the projectionists in the union. And so I think that while we pay tribute to the theaters, it comes down to what happened within the walls of the theater. I'll give you a quick example. My grandfather, Louis, was a huge UT fan. I mean, big time. And many times he would give the athletes money so they could go out on a date. They could always get into the movies free. He hired a couple interesting people. One was Wally Pryor, and who has always been really the voice of UT. I remember hearing him at Memorial Stadium, at every game, and what a voice, and gave him a job. And also, while attending UT, Eli Wallach worked as a usher over at the Paramount. And yeah, and there's many people I'd like to say that were involved, but I don't have their permission to mention who they were. But he took every one of them under his wing, and so there's the stories of these people are just amazing. Of these were strange people that owned theaters. I remember my dad at night, because he had the Chief and the Burnett Drive-In, and like clockwork, every night, 9 o'clock, he'd be sitting at the stool and looking at the TV, wondering what the weather was like, wonder if there was any people that would show up. And it's kind of crazy. But these were real showmen back then. Now it's not what it used to be. I remember one time, I'll say this real quickly, but they put a mummy on top of the Chief Drive-In. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And it scared the living frack out of people driving by on Lamar. But it was way up there, and there was this big, showing for the mummy. So
Was it just a regular human size, or was it
oh yeah,
gigantic?
it was human size, but
jeez.
it was strange, that
Yeah.
someone had the idea to do something like that.
But cool and just so Austin,
Yeah.
right?
So anyway, these were real showmen, the people that ran these theaters and owned these theaters. And I think sometimes we don't give enough homage to people like Carl Hoblitzell, and who, without him, there would be no State Theater or Paramount Theater or all these other theaters that were in Austin, who was a philanthropist and a great man. And he loved his theaters. So, and my grandfather, too, he was Mr. Show Business. So he wasn't perfect.
Yeah, right.
But anyway, so I think the people really made the theaters what they were to me. And
Yeah,
so.
I agree. And since I chinched y'all out of a feedback, let's move to the audience and let them ask a question or two, response or two. I was informed a few minutes ago as well that there is no photography allowed in the theater.
Why's that?
I don't know.
We're in a theater.
Because they said so. Does anybody have any questions, comments?
Well, the last
Awesome
movie at the
question.
Varsity.
That was you stole one of my questions. It's okay. Great question.
Depends on what you mean. We had a piggyback theater, so we had 2 screens, and the last movies were Roger and Me, which was kind of apt at that time, Michael Moore film. The last feature movie to play was Glory, Matthew Broderick, Denzel Washington. But the last film to play, this was the night before we closed. The last night, we stayed open. Chuck Eckerman let us stay open an extra night. We cooked the rest of the popcorn, and we gave that away, and we just invited people to come by and say goodbye. We popped all the popcorn, drained all the sodas, And I spent the last few days editing together all of the movie trailers that we still had. I was supposed to be returning these to the studios as we went along, but you know, I got kind of lazy and kept those, and I edited all of those together. Turned out to be about 3 hours long.
Wow.
And we played that the last night. So we played, it must have been 40 or 50 movie trailers that night.
Oh,
so
how
that
fun.
was the last movie.
Yeah.
Actually, I took those reels of trailers I offered them to the Austin History Center, but they didn't take that kind of thing at that time.
Huh, we
And
didn't?
they suggested I take it to the Harry Ransom Center. And so I took it there, and that's how I met Charles Bell,
That's how you got a
the
job.
curator, and I ended up getting a job there, and I've been
Wow.
there ever since. So
That was a fateful,
worked out well
that
for
was a
me.
fateful rejection by us. Yeah, it's a good
Which
thing.
proves that
It's a
breaking
good
the
thing we turned it
rules
down.
is a good thing sometimes.
Can I ask him a question? Do you remember who designed the twin,
Who designed it?
Louis Saldana and me?
Oh, okay. Oh, that's right. It was
Say it, who?
it was an unusual design to wall off the balcony
Yeah.
and turn it into a piggyback theater. But it worked pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, Paul. Hey.
Lights.
I need to share a story which I think is important in the whole history of movie theaters here. My name is Paul Maloy.
I don't know if I want to mess with this.
Yeah, I've done this before. Okay. I worked at the Paramount next door from 1985 to 2004. I have a few things I want to share because this means a lot to me. To Jay Podolnick, I knew your father Earl for many years. The Americana Theater, now a library on Hancock Drive, if y'all don't know that, was the finest movie theater in Austin.
That's right.
Bar none. My memory of seeing The Empire Strikes Back there on the first day it was released. Oh, others in the audience I see. Will never go away from me. Jim Maloy, I've known you and your son John for years. It's great to see you up here. Steve Wilson and John Stewart worked for me for a number of years at the Paramount, and it's great to see them as well. God, we share so many memories, but the one I want to share with everybody tonight, which is indelible for many of us and kind of a mini legend in Austin in the movie business. For many years, there was a projectionist in Austin by the name of Walter Norris. He worked at the Varsity Theater, I know, for many years when Steve was there, and before that, I believe.
Almost every day.
Almost every day. And then he worked at the Paramount, too, and was the projectionist for many years when we were doing the summer film series there. And now I'm having a senior moment. Was it 2000 or 2001?
2000.
2000, thank you, John. In the summer of 2000, we were beginning the film series as we did every year, and they almost did again this year, except Warner Brothers got contrary and they couldn't do it, by opening with Casablanca, which has become a tradition. And in 2000, it was opening night, we were showing Casablanca, as we always did, and I was sitting up in the balcony watching the movie for about the 85th time, and decided, I thought, well, you know, we need to turn the sound up a little bit. We had quite a team in those days. Steve was the house manager, you know, I was the general manager, and there was the projectionist, et cetera, and I'd relay a comment to Steve, who'd send it up to the booth, like sharpen the focus or turn the sound up or whatever, before everything became done by computers. You know, it was a team, it was showmanship, as Jay or Jim or somebody was saying earlier. Well, I was sitting up there, I said, you know, we really need to turn the sound up a little bit. So I decided I would go up to the balcony, up to the projection booth rather myself, and tell Walter just to crank up the volume a little bit. And when I got up there, I discovered there was trouble, and Walter was lying on the floor and was not moving. And so there was a problem. Walter was ill. And I called down to Steve, or I actually went running down. I couldn't get Steve on the phone because we didn't have cell phones in those days. Went running down to Steve, and we got EMS. And anyway, long story short, Walter had a heart attack and passed away that night. The medics were not able to revive him. We had to stop the show. It was one of the rare occasions where the show could not go on. But we went down and told the audience what had happened, that Walter had to be taken to the hospital. We didn't know what was going on. Everybody understood. Everybody filed out. A few people asked for refunds. Most of them we just gave a pass to come back. The next night we showed Casablanca again. John came in to fill in, and we showed the movie. And we were all there, and we had a toast for Walter, and the show went on. And a few days later, we had Walter's service at the Paramount. But all of us who were there that night will never forget that. And he meant such a lot to us and was such a fixture to so many patrons at the Paramount. Some of you who may have been around may remember Walter. Tall, kind of portly African-American man who always had a big smile on his face. And he would sit down in the lobby and greet people between screenings. But the show went on and the tradition went on with John in the booth, and John has been there ever since 2000. And every year except this year, the Paramount Summer Film Series is opened with Casablanca, but I think it's being worked in later in the summer now that Warner's has made the rights available again. So anyway, it's a memory that I think is really important as part of Austin's film community, and the sense of showmanship and camaraderie and everything that existed in those theaters, and that makes it, and still makes the Paramount such a special place next door, because there's still such dedication to the showmanship that's being carried on there every year and every summer. So for those of you who support that, thank you for all of us who are a part of that, which is represented by every person here on this panel. So I just wanted to share that tonight. I'm sorry I've taken far too much time telling this story, but I felt it was important to share it with you all, so thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that story. Wow, that's amazing. Now that you've got me on sharing stories, I hope you'd be interested in sharing that with us. In the exhibit, there's a section we have like a faux theater set up. You can go into this theater and, well, you can, there's a video screen in there so you can watch trailers of film classics, but you can also share your favorite movie-related story with us. Write it down on a piece of paper. You'll see that in there, of course. It can be anonymous. Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, I hope he shares that with us. I'll say, go for it, Jay.
I'm glad you shared that with us. And
Yeah,
it's
me too.
interesting about Casablanca because when I was a little kid, my grandparents on my father's side lived in Fairfax near Cantor's Deli, and Howard Koch would come by and hang out, and talk to my grandparents, and Orson Welles came by and would hang out with my parents and my grandparents, and so it's interesting that you bring up Casablanca, because the one person that was blacklisted pretty heavily, during the McCarthy era. It's a great film, and he was a great guy, interesting guy.
And he wore
It's
platform
very
shoes.
tiny, but I remember that.
He wore platform shoes too? Yeah. Apparently? Anyway, yes.
As a side note to
Yeah.
Casablanca, the first time I showed it,
You may have wondered about
Jim?
our personal lives. My young son was about 11, and my oldest son was 12, and he scratched his foot with a blue sock, and I had to take him to a doctor. So I went to the doctor, And Jay was about 12, and his dad was there. Now, I knew his dad for several years, but the hour that we waited to get waited on by the doctor, the two boys bonded, my oldest son and Jay, and they're still friends. And Jay was out to the house a while back. And also, boy across the street, so to speak, John, David over there, was about 11, and my young son John, who was right there, he was about 10, and John David lost his mother. And he grew up with my two boys, one younger and one older. So you might say we're a family since then. And all the managers I worked with, one that used to be here at the State, he would scream at you. He didn't talk nice. One of the other movie operators would scream at you, you know, like that. But when you work for him, you work for a gentleman. You know, I always told my family what a nice guy he was. And we're still friends. And John David
Oh, sweet.
sees us just about every week. And we see him every few months. And my young son and his fiancée and handsome grandson are out there.
It's all in the family. Right on. Yeah. Thank you. Well, let me get in another question here. This is for Jim and John Stewart. I'd like to know if you could tell us a bit about a day in the life of a movie projectionist. A day in the life of a projectionist. What's that like? Silence.
Well,
Yes?
you wake up about noon
Wish I had your job.
and try not to be too crabby for the rest of the day. You know, then you take a nap if you're not opening, and then you go to work. And, you know, you might imagine it gets to be quite a routine. You show a reel, you rewind a reel, you show a reel, and it goes back and forth. But, you know, I wouldn't trade the time. I enjoyed a lot of the movies I showed and didn't enjoy a lot that I did show. So, met people, and particularly down here at the Paramount, it's a good place to work. It's always exciting, particularly with the premieres and stuff, and it's just a good place. And I enjoy it. Not much. Oh. Well, the first time I showed Casablanca was at the Varsity Theater in the early 70s, and it was a midnight show. And the regular operator that worked there didn't want to work there that night because generally at the midnight movies, people were smoking these funny cigarettes. And he was certain he was going to get stoned and get busted. So I gratefully took the job and never even got a buzz. But anyway, at the Paramount, when we show Casablanca now, if we get past reel 2, we're doing real good.
If I could jump in, John is projections, and Jim for many years was a projectionist with what is called a changeover system. That's where you have two projectors side by side and you show a reel, and when that reel is over, a little bell rings and you switch over to the other projector. And that involves a lot more skill and know-how than most people realize. And it is a much more difficult job than most people realize. And I just want to give these guys credit for being very good at what they did for a long period of time. And we're grateful to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Jim?
The basic thing about the job was you went to work at 12 o'clock at the State Theater. You were there till 6. 500 people, 600 people all day long. They expected a movie on the screen for 6 hours that you were there. and this happened and that happened. Like The Wizard of Oz, I had never seen it, never showed it. And it opened here at noon. I put reel 1 on, the little girl was on a farm in Kansas or someplace, and I changed over to reel 2, and it's in color. I had a heart attack.
Jim, can you say that last part again? I didn't get it. Hold the mic up to your mouth. Could you tell that last part again? I'm sorry. I'm not sure if everybody got that. I didn't get it.
Again?
Just the last
Okay.
part, could you?
I opened the State Theater at noon with Wizard of Oz. I had never shown it or seen it before. The first reel, 20 minutes, is black and white. I put reel 2 on, the bell rang, I started the arc lamp, started the motor up, pushed the buttons, and it turned into color. I had a heart attack.
Ew,
I
glad you
wasn't
survived it.
expecting that, but that goes with the job.
When you're watching one of the old films that's played on a changeover system, if you watch closely, you'll see a little dot in the upper right-hand corner.
That's right.
That's your signal.
Means to change the reel, yeah.
And just real quickly, John Brzezborski, who was projectionist at the Texas when it was a porno theater, told me that very often they would put a giant X all the way across. So because the projectionist would be watching the movie and not paying attention and had to know when to make the changeover.
Yeah, the changeovers came
That's
at the
good.
oddest moments, I tell you.
But those changeovers, it wasn't. It took a projectionist really paying attention to not put in the wrong movie the next reel of a
Well,
different film.
You know, we still show films that way at the Paramount. That's the only way we can get archive prints. We're not allowed to splice it together like they do at the multiplexes. In fact, they're starting to wean theaters from getting archive prints. They're trying to force everybody to go digital. But we're one of the handful of theaters that still have access to these prints. We can get almost anything. But I showed something the other day that had a big explosion. There was all kinds of stuff going on the screen. I'd never seen it before. And I just barely caught the cue because it's hidden in the action.
Mm-hmm.
And it can drive you up the wall.
Yeah.
There's scratch marks in the booth. You can go look.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, while we're on the subject,
Yeah.
it's very important distinction about the changeover system because that is the safest way, safe in terms of protecting the film print. Film is going away. Kodak is all but gone out of business, and film is really on its way out, and the only prints you can get are from archives. And I can tell you that the Ransom Center, we have the policy of not loaning prints out to play on a changeover system on a platter system or whatever. So we're really lucky to have the Paramount and the Ritz that still have the changeover system because that's still the best way.
I agree, and I hope that continues well into the future. Audience comments, questions?
Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
I might be opening the floor actually in words here, but so digital opinions, thoughts, hate it, love it, despise it, open subject.
She wants to know what you think of digital format.
Well, as a projectionist and had worked with film forever, I thought it was a terrible thing to see film.
Can you hear him?
To see film go away, But the more that I show films over here off of Blu-ray, they're making pictures that look better than the films do. They can tweak the image so that the color is better, maybe not any sharper, but it tends to look a little bit better. I may be hung when I leave here by some people, but that's just the way it is. That's the way it's going to be, and we may as well just get used to it. I've got a friend in East Texas that converted his little theater. The studio says by 2013 they're going to stop distributing prints altogether, and so you either change over or go out of business. And this man has had way too much put into this little small town theater, and he's always kept it up to high standards. People come from all over the place to watch his films. And he converted 2 years ago now, and his business has improved. If it's a film that people want to see, they're coming in droves. If they don't want to see it, they're staying away in droves. But they appreciate the sound quality and the picture quality. So, we're just going to have to lay back and take it and enjoy it, or just stay home and watch our Blu-rays or whatever. But
John, did you say that's system-wide by 2013?
yes,
Wow, okay.
that's what they say.
That's what they say.
I like to.
We've screened some stuff at the Paramount within the last couple of years, a premiere, and they always send some technicians to check out the booth, make sure it's technically capable, blah blah blah, and sometimes they say, well, this is the first time we've seen this movie on film, because all of Hollywood, all the screening rooms are all digital now. And the theaters that were running film that have gone digital, there's no aftermarket for all this equipment, so they're just putting it in the dumpster, and they're recycling what they can, and what they can't, it's just going to the dump.
I want to add something to that. I think it's a travesty that it's gone into this direction solely just to digital. I think the studios, I would like to see them, and this comes to the realization that if we lose that media, like we've lost in the recording business for tape, I'm hoping that the studios will at least make or archive the films in a medium that will last, which film will last
Well,
if
that's-
taken care of.
That's
Digital.
the only real way they can archive a film or a movie, is even if it's shot digitally.
That's right.
They'll output it to a negative, and the negative has approximately 100 years plus storage. The modern negative does. But yeah, I hate to see film go away, but
Yeah.
I have no choice.
I mean, someday it's going to be like Thunderdome, and and you won't be able to see a movie because you won't have electricity or whatever, but you'll have somebody being able to crank something with a candle, and you'll see an image, So
Yikes. Steve, would you like
Well,
to speak to this?
There are pluses and minuses for every medium. Digital has a good. One of the pluses is the quality of the presentation, as John was saying. That it's a little easier for a smaller theater, or like the State has a 2K projector, and that's getting pretty equivalent to 35 millimeter, and it can have good sound, and if everything's maintained and all of that. I think the downside of digital is in the preservation of the individual films. With motion picture film, especially 35, you can actually hold it up to the light and see the image, and we also know that celluloid will last at least 100 years because we have 100-year-old film. Digital is not the savior of film. It is actually really difficult to maintain that over time, to keep that. They call it bit rot and things like that can creep in. And as John says, a lot of the studios are still taking a movie that is made on digital and saving it on motion picture film for archiving. Or sometimes with Technicolor, they'll save the different yellow, magenta, and cyan. But So there's pluses and minuses with both. I hope that film sticks around. I think that there will be a certain amount of boutique exhibitors, summer film series like the Paramount, or nonprofit theaters like the Ritz. I think those are our only two theaters left in Austin that can play film. So hopefully they'll stick around.
I don't know how long it'll last, but there are still some cinematographers or filmmakers that prefer to shoot on film.
That's right.
You know, it'll be distributed digitally, but they prefer the original look of the film negative itself.
Okay. Let's take one more. That lady over there, please. Yes? It smelled like guano.
The Queen, the Hancock?
Wow.
And where was this?
You're saying at the Queen? At the Queen? Or at the
Oh, the Hancock Opera House.
the Capitol? The Capitol.
Capitol, yeah, there were a lot of bats there. Pardon me? I don't understand. I didn't hear you.
She is saying that there were a lot of bats at the Capitol Plaza.
No.
At the Capitol Theater, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Every
at the Capitol
theater I worked at had bats.
Yeah, bats
we had
everywhere.
bats in every
We are in
yeah.
Austin. Capitol Plaza Cinema.
Capitol Plaza
It's a General Cinema Corporation.
Very first showing of Star Wars, John, she said, at Capitol Plaza Theater? Is that what she's
I
saying?
wasn't in town at the time.
Yeah? Okay. All right. We've got folks who remember that.
Speaking of the Hancock Opera House or the Capitol, you know, this was a real piece of work, this building, where they would have live chariots on stage, you know, and vaudeville acts, and same thing with the Paramount. Houdini played next door.
Yeah. Now, this
yeah.
is at the Capitol. We're talking about the Hancock.
No, this is the Paramount.
We're talking about the Paramount
But
now.
at the Capitol, they actually had live horses doing Ben-Hur.
Yes.
They were in big productions. I mean, the theaters were places where people would gather, and was probably one of the only places during the war that you could get news. So
Yes.
they would show what was going on in the world, and that was the only entertainment and news source that people had, were coming to theaters.
And the Hancock was the very first movie house or venue to show a motion picture here in Austin back in 1896. Yeah, when they
Well-
tore it down.
Well, actually, I've got
She knows where the pieces
you know where
are.
the pieces are? Well, it's probably in the grave of the woman who buried it. No? Okay. Okay, because I know
Okay.
that my family tried to save the Paramount. I'm sorry, not the Paramount, but the Hancock Opera House. But the person who owned it was determined to see it go down. Nothing, no matter money of it.
She said someone named Pee Wee Franks tore it down. What year was that torn down? It was raised and they put up a parking lot or some such thing. The late, like 68 or 69. Yeah. You can read
But
more about
we
that.
tried
in
to
our
save
exhibit.
it because it was a great place, but there was something she would never, there was a secret behind it all. We don't ever know what it is, but she wanted it destroyed, so.
Okay. Let's move on. You want to take one more? Somebody have one? Yes, down here. She knows a film restorationist in town. What is it?
Image trips?
Image trips. Trends.
And the University of Texas does archiving of film.
Okay, that's
So,
good to know.
And restoration.
Yeah. Let's move on here to our next question. I want Jim to tell us the story about Lyndon Johnson visiting the Americana. Can you tell us that story? Can someone
Johnson.
let him know what I'm asking?
President Johnson visiting the Americana.
Oh, yeah.
You have a story?
Let it roll.
Yes, I was working, it was called a 70 millimeter print. The film's about that wide. And it's all you can do to pick up 2,000 feet of that. And use 2 operators during the show. And I got out there that evening to go to work. And the theater manager had white socks and black shoes and a black suit on. Well, his father sent him home to get some decent socks. But anyway, Mr. Johnson and Mrs. Johnson and the daughter and 3 or 4 of her friends and 3 or 4 Secret Service people came to see the show, and they had reserved a whole row for them. And after the show was over, everybody else left first, and then the Johnsons came out and met the people in the lobby, and it was really interesting. And I never saw him again until at the Capitol. I shot some 16 millimeter home movies of him when he and Mr. Kennedy were running for the presidency.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Yeah, those things were important in those days. Dark socks meant you were supposed to wear dark socks, right? White socks were out.
Well,
And they-
it was Joe Dyer who was the manager of the Americana, and he was the greatest. He was
Yeah.
really one of the most decent men I ever met. And he didn't know that the president was really coming, I don't think. And so
He was, yeah.
obviously Dad knew Lyndon and everything, so they went way back. And in fact, my mom and Dad were married at Carl Hoblitzell's home in Dallas, and
Wow,
Lyndon
I
was
didn't
there.
know that.
So
Wow.
it was pretty amazing that people in front didn't know that the President of the United States was sitting behind them on the last row while they were watching the film. And
Oh, yeah.
that won't happen again.
Yeah. Yeah.
You might be interested in a very brief little story. I was in the 7th grade at John T. Allen Junior High School, which was then up on 9th Street. And the science teacher came by and said, "James, today we're getting a brand new 16 millimeter Bell & Howell sound projector. Would you be interested in meeting that Bell & Howell man and let him show you how to run it?" I said, "Well, of course I would." And he said, "Well, go have dinner, but be back here at 3:30. Well, about 2 weeks later, when 3:30 finally came, he showed up, real nice gentleman. We took the old 35 millimeter out. We put the new sound projector in, ran the cable back of the screen, put the speaker behind the screen. They had a kind of a preview room for the science department. And he says, "My gosh, it's 5 o'clock, after 5. Can I take you home?" I said, "Well, okay, thank you." And he drove me home. I lived in the 1300 block on Travis Heights Boulevard. I was in the 7th grade. He says, "James, I live up the alley 3 houses from you. A brand new Bell & Howell dealer. And that's all I live for was movies." I said, "Yes."
Yeah.
He says, "Well, come by Saturday about 9 o'clock. I'll find a lot of things for you to do." So they get like 6 Bell & Howell projectors for El Paso from Chicago, where they made them, and I have to set each one up and run a film on it, make sure it's okay, put extra bulbs and maybe a rewind and extra lenses or stuff and things for the audiovisual. Then I put it in a big box and see if they got shipped out. That was most of my things for 15 cents an hour. But that's the way I got started.
Yeah.
And then I worked about 6 months at the North Austin Drive-In, and then a little later on I went into the military. Make a long story short, I was in there a week. My back was killing me. I loved the service. I loved the getting up in the morning and eating and drilling all day and everything. But my back was killing me. And the sergeant says, I want to volunteer. Well, I thought, hell, you can sit down and peel potatoes. So I volunteered. And he says, take half a dozen of your friends over to the bachelor officers' quarters, and you make them clean it up. It was about a block long and 3 stories high. They had about 100 single officers living in this building. And so it was about 10 o'clock, and I was in their little rec room reading Life magazine, and this captain comes in. We start talking, and in our conversation, he says, I had corporal stripes pinned on me, and he said, Corporal, I'm a Catholic too, and I didn't know it was a sin to be an objectionist. I said, no, sir, not objectionist, projectionist.
That's good.
So he reaches in his pocket and gives me his card, and he says, you be at regimental in the morning in Class A uniform. Look me up, I'll be there, 7 o'clock sharp. I said, yes, sir, and he left. So I found my first sergeant that night after supper, and he says, God, you know who this is? I said, well, it's a real nice captain. This is the general's son, you dumbass. I said, I didn't know. So anyway, the next morning I showed up, and he took me over to the Audiovisual War Department of Theaters. God bless me, I couldn't be any more happier.
The rest is history, folks.
I spent 1.5 years in, like I said, in theater number 2, then 1.5 years over in Tripoli and Bari, Italy. So altogether, 46 years.
All right. Right on. Still going strong. All right. Let's take some audience comments, questions. Yes, ma'am? How many gates in the projector?
The first time? The very first time?
Your mic. Get your mic.
The first time it was infinity. I've got it down to 30 seconds to a minute maybe now, if I'm feeling
To
good.
thread a single reel, you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of rollers in those things and sprockets to hit and get it in frame
Yeah.
and right tension and over the sound head. But when I look up and the other reel is about to run out and I haven't threaded this projector, I get real fast.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Another one?
I'd
Yes,
like to
ma'am?
bring something up real quick before, if it's okay. I want to bring something up that there might be some questions about this, but you were saying that, you know, my family were the first to integrate theaters, but the sad truth is the movie theater industry was among the last business to desegregate, and that's pretty horrible. I remember that at the Paramount you had separate entrances for
Yeah.
blacks and
We-
so.
I'm going to get to you in a moment. You can say more
okay.
about that.
Okay.
Folks? Other comments, questions? Yes? Say it again.
I never did
Rebel
work there,
Drive-In
but Jimmy
stories.
worked there a little bit, and he said that plenty of nights when it was foggy, there were still people down there watching the movie. You couldn't see the screen for the fog. Lewis.
Lewis?
I had the fortunate job of being one of the technicians that maintained that equipment at the Rebel.
So Louis Saldana maintained the equipment at the Rebel.
One of the interesting things
Yeah, see, passing that mic.
About the Rebel and newer technologies is that they were one of the first drive-ins to install the sound system so that you didn't have to put the little box on your window for the drive-in.
Oh, yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and you could play the movie through your radio,
Very cool.
which is interesting.
High tech.
And later, in fact, I think this is only about a year ago, I found out that some acquaintances actually lived behind the Rebel Drive-In, and they would get on top of the roof of the house and bring their little portable radio so they could watch the film.
Wow. Wow, that's neat.
What was
that's a
the
cool story.
wattage on the projector at a drive-in? What was the normal, how bright was that light?
I know we were running Century projectors with Century sound heads and strong xenon lamps, and I think we were running 2,500 watts or 3,000 watts.
Oh, I thought it would be a lot
Of
more. I
xenon
guess
power.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Thank you. All right, now on to Jay. As I said earlier, you were born the same year. Trans Texas was founded in 1952, so you grew up with Trans Texas. You were siblings, so to speak. I was wondering if you could just tell us a bit more about that experience growing up with Trans Texas and about your parents and grandparents, for example, what their values were and how that influenced the way they did business.
Okay. Like I said, this was about, all these people were characters that had theaters, and my mother and father came from, even before they had the theaters, my mother was singing in Hollywood when she was at UCLA. She went to UCLA, and she was in some movies with John Wayne, and was managed by Roger Edens, whose only other client was Judy Garland. And she actually stood in for Judy for one of her moments, and for a radio show, and made records. So there was always this underlining kind of factor of entertainment, and my grandfather really pushed her really hard to be an actress in her whole career. And I found, after her passing, I actually found a letter from Roger Edens, this ornate handwritten letter on MGM's letterhead, telling Louis basically to back off, and that, don't push her so hard, and that he has met the young man that she's fallen in love with, and he seems to be a really great guy. And that ended up being my dad.
Yeah.
And so she gave up her career to come back to Austin to marry my father, because she said, show business or being with my dad, she'd rather be with my dad. But growing up in the theater business with a family like I had, we had a lot of connections in the business, and I'd go to screenings in Los Angeles. I remember when The Alamo came out, I might have been one of the first people to see it in '62. I was 10 years old, and I was sitting over here was Lawrence Harvey, and over here was Richard Widmark. And I'll never forget, and even though I was really young, I knew the heck who they were. And then afterwards, we went over to John Wayne's office. And,
Wow.
So I mean, there were a lot of things I had that was
normal
really
kid
great.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, like I was able to have, I had lunch with Walt Disney.
Wow.
Got to hang out with Chill Wills, and
Amazing.
but it was the great thing that I remember about I'll tell you my most favorite movie moment was, and I get back to the integration of the theaters. Shortly afterwards, a movie came out called To Kill a Mockingbird, which had a huge impression on me and the rest of the world, really.
Yeah.
My father, after seeing that, and from all the racial tension and everything was going on, my dad, at his expense, if you remember, I don't know if you remember this, but he bussed in third through sixth grade classes of children over the Texas and the Americana to show them the film, because hopefully they would go back to the class and the teacher would discuss with them the meaning and the message they got from seeing the movie and how important that message was. So that is one of my most favorite, endearing moments, was that they did this out of their own, you know. And there are people that still come up to me. There's two things they say. They say, I remember when I went to when I went and saw To Kill a Mockingbird. And the other thing is, I remember those rocking chair seats at the Americana.
I remember you could smoke at the Americana.
Wow. Well, yeah, smoking all over.
And that's what I meant by 1 and 2, but it was part of the whole.
Oh, okay. I see. What year was that, To Kill a Mockingbird? When was that made? 62? Yeah. So anyway, that gives us a context.
And he did it for 15 years.
Wow, 1962.
15 years.
Yeah, Austin was slow to, obviously Jim Crow was in place, and movie-going was quite segregated. I believe that movie theaters back in the 30s and 40s would have, colored midnight shows. And then I guess eventually, what was it? Was it the Paramount who opened up their balcony? Which one was it? The Ritz opened up their balcony to African Americans so they could see movies at the same time as white theater
It was the Paramount,
goers.
actually.
I thought it was.
In fact,
I thought it was the Paramount myself. Okay,
It
so the
is?
Ritz and the Paramount. Yeah.
I had a conversation with Eli Wallach when he was in town about
Oh,
a year
wow.
or two ago.
Wow, he's
And
still going.
He is. He's
Wow.
97 years old, and he's still making movies.
How old?
97.
97. Wow.
And he had written a book, and he actually brought up the fact about how horrible it was working at the Paramount when he would have to walk African Americans up the stairs, and
Yeah.
how bad he felt about it. And I completely understand. It was horrible.
Yeah. The first theaters to fully integrate, I guess, were the UT theaters. It was the Texas and the Varsity, right, on the drag, to fully integrate during the civil rights period. Anyway, we've got more about that as well. In our exhibit, we have a whole section on segregation in movie theaters in Austin.
And during that time, people were not very happy with us. We were getting death threats
No, I don't doubt that
and all
at
that
all.
kind of thing. You know, and they persevered.
Yeah.
They just knew it was right. Should have been done sooner.
Yeah. Audience? Anybody? Gentlemen here?
Really? Right.
Wow. There was a reunion of the folks who picketed or did the stand-in at the... Yeah. Right.
Actually, the ones that were more prevalent were the ones that didn't want it. You know, were protesting. You know.
Oh, yeah.
Crazy.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy.
I've just been told we have 5 more minutes, so let's move along here. Let's see. I have some choices. I'm going to ask my final question, which is the same one I asked at the previous panel. I'd like to ask all of our panelists, looking into the future, say 25 or 30 years from now, do you think movie theaters will still be a part of the Austin landscape? That's movie theaters, whether they're digital or film or whatever. Do you think theaters will be a part of the Austin landscape? What is your take on the future of the movie theaters? Please.
I think so. I think people like to cling together occasionally to watch films. It's more fun to watch a funny film with an audience than it is by yourself. It's always more fun. But yeah, I think there'll be theaters of some sort.
Oh, yeah.
You're an optimist.
Yeah,
Yes.
the shared experience is really important. And I think especially as theater owners understand what it is that brings people to the theater, there are some theaters that do that really well. I think Tim League and the Alamo are doing that really well. I think the Paramount does it really well with the summer film series. Understanding that it's not just the movie title that you're playing, but it's the experience of gathering together and sharing that experience, I think, will always be with us. So I think theaters will be around. There are some other ways of doing things. I read an article I think it was in the Chronicle recently about some sort of social media thing where it's like a Kickstarter for movies, where people can gather or there's say a movie, say the restored version of Metropolis. A lot of people want to see that. You buy your tickets online. If you get enough people to have a full house, well, then the movie plays, and if you don't, it doesn't. There are some of these schemes that might help make theaters like this more viable in the future. So there's a lot of hope, I think.
Yeah. Jim? Future of movie theaters. Can you tell him the question? Thank you.
I'm sorry?
The relevance of movie theaters in the future, will they be relevant?
I don't know.
You don't know? Yeah. All right. Okay. Thank you, Jim. Jay?
I think it's going to be very difficult because I think there will be theaters, but the studios try to dip into every single bit of profit that any theater can make. And the land is getting more expensive, the electricity is getting more expensive. It's just really hard because, I'll give you, for instance, when somebody ever asked my dad what he did for a living, he says, I sell popcorn.
Yeah.
And that's true. I mean, you make it off of the candy and all the other things because the studios are going to really put it to you. And I hope that will that will be the end of the theaters if they start getting into the profits of the candies and drinks and things like that. And they've been trying to for a long time. I'd like to see the theaters continue. I hope they do. But I think you have to respect history. And one problem I have is this is the State Theater. It's not Stateside Theater. I don't get it. And I think it does an injustice to the people like Carl Hobletzel, my grandfather, and everybody that worked here or next door for not being outside of the box enough to think about how you can promote this place without having to connect the two, because they shouldn't be connected. They're two separate histories, two separate theaters. So I'm afraid that, that's one thing that I'm fairly strong about. This should be the State Theater and not, Stateside. And that's why I think if there is anything that's going to deteriorate the theaters, stupid things like that, that
Well,
you take, thank you. Because, I feel pretty passionate about it because I grew up in these
Yeah,
places.
Don't quit holding back, man. What?
well,
Oh, I got more.
Wallflower here. Wow.
I've got more. But
Well, I think theaters
Yeah.
will be around for a long time, but historic theaters like the State and the Varsity and other theaters, they're dropping like flies all over the country.
Let's,
And
let's
they're-
keep
they're just-
attendance up, folks.
And
Let's
it's
not
getting
let it
harder
drop.
and harder to preserve these
that's why we need
historic
to
theaters.
keep the historical value individually of each theater.
Yeah.
And once you start combining and trying to be creatively, I don't know, want to keep your job or whatever, or create your own job for publicity, it will fall apart. So I agree. I think the theaters like this will stand if you look back and make them historical.
Well, we have to put a high value on these
Right.
older
Yeah,
theaters.
yeah, yeah. So, do we have time for an audience? Yes? Yes?
The Alamo?
What is your take on the Alamo Theater?
That's my favorite thing. I love the Alamo.
Now
And
a
I love
chain?
what Tim League and what and Carrie League. I love
Born and raised
I love
here
the
in
show
Austin.
business attitude that they have,
Yeah.
especially with the opening
Yeah.
films that they show. That I love those places.
Well, I think they put the emphasis on the total experience and not just on the movie you play. I think it's wonderful that
agree.
they serve food and drinks and all that, but it's more than just that. I love their emphasis on maintaining the quiet, during the no talking rule. I think that's wonderful.
I love their warnings.
Yeah, and
Classic.
the pre-show, I love the reserved seats that they're doing now, and their emphasis is on, and this kind of goes to what Jay was saying. Their emphasis is on pleasing the audience rather than
The people,
putting their hand in
yeah,
their pocket.
exactly.
Which is what we've had since the 70s. Really, there was a turn in the movie theater business of looking at the audience as dollars and getting your hand in their pocket and just selling popcorn, which the studios were their own. Well, we could get into a whole talk about why, but there was a change in the mall theaters and the multiplexes where it was all about moving the audience in and moving them out, and it was kind of a reality of the business at the time. But I'm seeing a change here, especially here in Austin, with providing a good service, an entertaining night at the movies, and I think that's something really wonderful.
Like the Velvet, is it Velvet Crown?
Violet Crown.
Violet
That's
Crown.
fabulous,
Yeah, love it.
And that's why my mom and dad got out of the business, because it became something else.
Yeah.
And transformed into this, whatever it is today. So it lost its value, its content.
Yeah.
So,
Interestingly enough, that's where our exhibit ends. Our ending point is at the multiplex, the rise of the multiplex, basically. Others? Anyone else? Who? Yes? Does this
Paramount.
theater have a historic landmark designation?
Paramount does.
We know the Paramount does,
Paramount
for
does,
sure.
For sure.
Mhm.
I don't know.
I
if-
don't think this
I don't think the state
one
has that
does.
designation. What have you got in
with this city
mind?
council, you can tear anything down. I'm sorry.
I
What
think
they did
as
with
long-
Seahome, well, anyway.
I would
As long
think
as it's
highly
associated
unlikely.
with the Paramount, I don't think it'll get torn down. Yeah.
Jim wants to say something.
One of the newer problems, I was business agent for our union for several years, and I had a man that was running a 10-plex. And my wife and I met them, he and his wife, and a beautiful little girl, and we really liked them as friends. And John Stewart told him one day he heard that the ranch people at Seguin were considering building a 10-plex theater because the one or two theaters in Seguin were not satisfactory. They had problems. So he went down and talked to these people. He designed a 10-plex theater downtown Seguin right next to the great big HEB. They built it. He opened it. He ran it for 8 or 9 or 10 years now. Now, next year, there's not going to be any more film. He has 10 projection rooms with projectors in them. To replace it, each projection room, $85,000.
Pretty
You've got
expensive,
10
yeah.
projection rooms.
Yeah, wow.
The ranch people were
Yeah.
tossing it up in the air whether to go or not go, but they decided to go. I mean, that's just one of the new problems coming up is $850,000.
Right. I'm being told that we're going to need to end our panel discussion. I want to thank our guests. I think this has been, they've been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much, guys, for being here. Thank y'all. You had some really great, y'all had some really great questions and comments. Thank you so much. It was organic and conversational. Excellent. Now, I'd like to introduce our movie for this evening. It's called Austin, the Friendly City. This was a promotional piece produced by our very own Chamber of Commerce back in 1943. The Austin History Center was able to restore this film a few years ago with a grant. So we are very pleased to share this with you this evening. I guess the panelists need to exit the stage.
Thank you all
Thanks,
very
guys.
much.
Yeah,
Thanks for coming to the State Theater.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
This has
Jay.
been really wonderful. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your patience.
Okay. We're cutting the lights. Great. Thanks.
Eager? Yes, for Billy and Betty have heard so much about their capital city, how it nestles in the Colorado River Valley, and their eyes shine brightly as they see the clean white buildings reflecting the warm sunlight. Let's meet these folks, for they represent the hundreds of families who make Austin their home every year. They might even be you. This is Betty Smith and her mother. Betty can hardly wait to make new friends at high school. Billy and his dad are real pals, and they have been talking about fishing trips on the lakes and so many other adventures ahead. Well, it's been a long, hard drive, and no one is more glad than Father as he wipes the sweat from his brow. Everybody lend a hand to get unloaded. Oops, well, you almost made it, and we know just how you feel. Within a month after the arrival, other new folks in Austin are given a cordial reception by the Austin Chamber of Commerce. Best of all, they get a big sack full of Austin products that is welcome in anybody's pantry. The chairman makes everyone feel right at home, and then he asks you just to relax for an interesting picture trip around the city. Off go the lights, and a picture of the magnificent state capitol building flashes on the screen. This structure, central landmark of the city, was completed in 1888 out of native Texas granite. Lacking cash, the state paid for it with 3 million acres of public land. What a thrill for the Smith family as they are warmly greeted by the governor himself. And Billy's breath almost stopped as the governor's 10-gallon hat was placed upon his head. From the central arch of the Capitol, looking south, you see Congress Avenue, central business thoroughfare, and the principal business section of the city. The governor's mansion, lovely example of the true lines of the Southern colonial home, has been the home of every Texas governor since 1853. Many visitors daily explore the interior of the mansion, which contains numerous articles of great historical interest. Chief among these is undoubtedly the Sam Houston bed, slept in by the great patriot and statesman of Texas history. There now, for Billy the temptation is just too great, but his watchful sister knows what to do. As a seat of state government, Austin has a number of state buildings, inasmuch as the Capitol long ago was outgrown. The State Highway Building is the nerve center for the construction and maintenance of Texas highways. The Walton Building at one time was the county courthouse, but was converted to the use of several state departments. The State Office Building provides space from several major departments of the state government. The State Health Department recently moved into these spacious new quarters, where they can more adequately serve the health needs of the state. For example, this traveling dental unit makes dental care possible in areas where it would otherwise be lacking. Other types of traveling units, together with the most modern methods of treatment, bring better health to the people within our far-flung boundaries. Of particular interest is the treatment for rabies. Serum is being constantly prepared by the state laboratory, and this pasture treatment has saved a great many lives in the past. Also, the laboratory receives and analyzes thousands of samples from over the state. Your Uncle Sam lives here. The federal building provides working space for the Internal Revenue Department, the federal court, and other departments. The municipal building is a pleasing example of a modern city hall, quite in keeping with the city government, which has since 1928 operated on a cash basis. Brackenridge Hospital, municipally owned and operated, is equipped with the finest materials. The county courthouse is likewise an attractive governmental building. Its design, including the jail on the very top, is adequate for all units of the county government. It is constructed of a type of shellstone quarried in Travis County. To satisfy their natural curiosity, our youngsters are probing the embedded fossils of a prehistoric age. You'll be writing letters, of course, to all the folks, so you must recognize the post office when you see it. Courtesy boxes are mighty handy for posting letters when you're driving by. Just before the turn of the century, there lived in Austin a very wonderful artist, Elizabeth May. Her imagination unfettered by limitations of time and space, she lived and worked here, and her sculpture is displayed in European capitals and in our national capital. Billy and Betty feel the air of old-world mystery as they enter the museum. Before the statues marked Prometheus Bound, Schopenhauer, Albert Sidney Johnston, Lady Macbeth, and many others, visitors stand with bated breath, as though the warmth of life should suddenly come to this cold marble. These and many other art treasures in the May Museum have made it a shrine for art lovers. The Austin Women's Club, home of Austin Club Women, is an unusual place that has a definite spot in the architectural album of the city. Patterned after a French chateau, its rugged masonry, powerful buttresses, descending terraces, and elaborate interiors make it one of Austin's showplaces. The Texas Federation of Women's Clubs occupies its pretty colonial home at 24th and San Gabriel Streets. Designed to serve the needs of visiting club women from over the state, as well as providing beautiful reception parlors and auditoriums for local use, the building is certainly an enhancement to the beauty of the city. The past is dead, but it lives again in our museums. Texas under 6 flags, the glorious days of the Republic, the days of early statehood and pioneers, those periods of history we revere and cherish. In the old land office, historic in its own right, are 2 museums, the Daughters of the Confederacy and Daughters of the Republic of Texas. Just to see and touch the actual desk where the great O. Henry worked in the old land office and illustrated maps with his deft pen is something we'll never forget. In the state cemetery, often called the Arlington of Texas, lie buried nearly 2,000 Confederate dead and numerous Texas patriots, heroes, and statesmen. Albert Sidney Johnston, Confederate general who fell at Shiloh, was memorialized in marble by Elizabeth May. Stephen F. Austin, the father of Texas, and for whom our city is named, lies here. The French legation was built by France over 100 years ago as a home for her ambassador to the old Republic of Texas. The lumber came from Bastrop, the furniture and hardware by sailing ship across the ocean. Experts say, and who will dispute them, that the treaty oak is over 500 years old and was an acorn when Columbus discovered America. Its branches spread 126 feet from side to side. What a swell place for taking pictures or just having fun. What now? Well, this time it's Dad who does the chasing, and we'll wager somebody will get his trousers torn. William Sidney Porter, or O. Henry, as the world knows one of its best-loved short story writers, lived and loved in this modest little cottage, which is now the O. Henry Museum, containing many of his personal belongings. His dictionary, well worn by constant thumbing, gave him the wonderful vocabulary that gives his stories their sparkle and life. Father studies carefully an old original copy of the Rolling Stone, O. Henry's famous newspaper. The Texas Memorial Museum belongs to every citizen of Texas. Located on the university campus, it contains marvelous collections of biographical, historical, and archaeological texana. Here is preserved in modern fashion the past, so the curious eyes of future generations may see. Here is exhibited the famous gavel collection of former Vice President John Nance Garner. Billy and Betty enjoy the contrast between the largest and smallest gavels in the collection. Recreated from the days when prehistoric monsters roamed the plains of a wild country, this skeleton holds little fear for Billy. The Austin Senior High School is a community in itself, where nearly 3,000 students are taught by the best methods and equipment. Safety patrols, organized by the Chamber of Commerce, have prevented any major traffic accident at public schools in the city. The University Junior High School is operated in cooperation with the University of Texas. Whoa there, Billy, you're late. Better hurry, or you'll be detained after school. Kids really have fun, as well as learning plenty at the elementary school, such as this one. Who knows but a future president may be playing leapfrog here. St. Edward's University, the Notre Dame of the South, is a Catholic university for men, which has for years enjoyed a splendid record among major educational institutions of the South. During the war, it not only maintained its curriculum, but devoted much time to military instruction. St. Mary's Academy, a Catholic school for girls, occupies a lofty site that was once the home of Mirabeau V. Lamar, the first president of the Republic. Concordia College teaches young men to prepare for Lutheran ministry under a fine staff of instructors. This is the chapel of the Presbyterian Theological Seminary, a long-established training center of the Presbyterian Church. The second major landmark of Austin, and one that is dear to the heart of every Texan, is the University of Texas Library Building, or the Tower, as it is usually called. It is the heart of that great school which ranks among the top 10 of the nation, whose graduates have become leaders over the world. The rare book collections in the library, containing thousands of priceless first editions and manuscripts, are read and studied by scholars from all nations. Safely kept under lock and key is the Plymouth Bible, which came over with the Pilgrims, and you can see the sketch of the Mayflower made on its margin. From the flower-decked balcony adjacent to the Stark Library, the city appears wrapped in a veil of sunlight. But let us go up, up to the very top of the tower, 300 feet above the ground, where the massive tower bells ring out the time. Here the feeling is one of loftiness, or riding on a cloud, as the panorama of scenery unfolds to us in all directions. Billy and Betty hadn't been here very long before they wanted to know all about those odd lights. Those tower lights everywhere. They're just like moonlight, Billy remarked. And to his surprise, he found that Austin people have been saying that very thing for years. It's moonlight every night in Austin. It's an interesting story, too, and these tower lights, 29 of them, 150 feet high, have lighted the city for 50 years, from the time she was a little pioneer village until now. Austin folks love them, and so far as we know, no other city in the world has them. They add a fascinating, enchanting sparkle to the city at night when travelers approach. Where there is no vision, the people perish. Built on this cornerstone, Austin has prospered as a Christian community. 94 white and 44 colored churches of every denomination serve the spiritual needs of her citizens. There is equal opportunity for old and young, rich and poor, to worship with that freedom on which our country was founded. St. David's Episcopal Church is said to be the oldest standing church in Texas except the missions. Would you believe that this was once a cow pasture? Under a program of civic improvement, it was changed into East Avenue, a pleasure to the eye and a major north-south thoroughfare. Austin is grateful for the privilege of having here the state eleemosynary institutions, where you and I help care for our unfortunate brethren. The Austin State Hospital cares for adults who are mentally deficient. 85% of the blind children of the state receive instruction at the Texas School for the Blind, where they are taught from kindergarten through high school age various trades and occupations to make them free from dependence upon society and able to make their own living. Many of the articles produced by these blind children are of exceptional beauty and value. And the cakes these girls can bake, oh boy. Would you guess that these boys are skating in darkness, yet having a swell time? The state school, where mentally deficient children are cared for and educated, is a model of its kind. Another example of Austin's many lovely thoroughfares is West 15th Street. Such parked areas are always kept in excellent appearance. The Texas School for the Deaf, among the largest of its kind in the nation, specializes in teaching the latest methods to its students. With the university library, the state library, and the public library which you see here, Austin is far better equipped than most cities are. The public library, with its comfortable reading rooms and home-like atmosphere and well-filled shelves, is a standing invitation in itself to the entire family. Membership cards are a mere formality, and then it doesn't take long for father and mother and sister and brother to find books to their liking. What every community needs for the rest and relaxation of its folks, is plenty of playgrounds. Deep Eddy, this wonderful swimming pool, is only one of 13 parks and playgrounds scattered over the entire city, where play is supervised all summer by top-notch recreation department leaders, where community nights and games bring out hidden talent, and playground equipment develops sturdy muscles and healthy bodies and reduces juvenile delinquency to a minimum. The municipal golf course is one of 3 fine courses in the city. Golfing weather is prevalent almost the year round, and the beautiful slopes and greens keep their restful color even through the winter. Well, Father, it was a good try. Ah, he made it. Center of sports for the Southwest is Texas Memorial Stadium, where huge crowds gather each fall to watch hard-fought, brilliant games between the University of Texas and leading teams of the Southwest and of the nation. Texas Cowboys and other campus pep organizations add color and fire to the games. Square dancing, or ballroom dancing, or tennis, or volleyball, or baseball, or gymnastics. All these and many more are offered to you by the City Recreation Department at the Austin Athletic Club. Daddy of them all, 340-acre Zilka Park is about everything you could wish for. River drives, walks, flowers, scores of picnic tables and barbecue pits tucked away in secluded spots, Boy and Girl Scout huts, sunshine camp, police target range, skeet field, casting pool, baseball park, and well, just something to suit everyone's taste. Today's a nice day for a picnic, so let's walk along the lily ponds, down the rock steps, and spread our lunch under the sheltering branch of a big oak tree. A ham sandwich always tastes better from the picnic basket than it does at home, doesn't it? Zilka Springs in the fall and winter is like one of nature's lovely paintings. Although bordered by man's walks and walls, the natural spring waters reflect the soft colors of the smooth slopes and terraces. 17 million gallons of pure cold spring water flow through these outlets every day and thereby create Austin's most popular swimming pool. In the good old summertime, we all go out to the park, and in less time than it takes to tell it, we're swimming around in that grand old pool. Forgotten are the worries of the day and the temperature. We're floating around, happy, refreshed, and developing an enormous appetite for that picnic lunch waiting up on the hill. And no matter how many folks are in, there never seems to be a crowd, for the pool is so very large that there's plenty of room for everybody. On Thursday and Sunday nights during the summer, 5,000 folks gather on a hillside in the park, under the stars, to enjoy band concerts, programs, and community singing. The hills west of Austin are a web of interesting scenic routes. Suppose we drive through the park and visit the great dams and lakes within 50 miles of Austin on the Colorado River. Buchanan Lake is one of the largest freshwater lakes in the United States, and the dam that creates it is 2 miles long. This is just one section of the many floodgates that are a part of the dam. Just below Buchanan Lake is Inks Lake, a placid 3-mile body of water that is used principally for power generating purposes. Marble Falls Dam has for years been a favorite spot for fishermen and sportsmen. The turbulent waters rushing for a mile over jagged rocks are a beautiful spectacle. Mansfield Dam, creating Lake Travis, is the largest in the series of dams in central Texas. These dams were built for a threefold purpose: conserving floodwaters for irrigation in times of drought, controlling devastating floods, and producing low-cost electricity. In all of these, they have been highly successful. Lake Travis is 65 miles long and 8 miles wide. And thus we come to the end of our ride on the magic carpet of photography. As the day draws to a swift close, you survey the beauty of Lake Austin, which winds for 22 miles past breathtaking scenery.
Oh, beautiful, what made you dream that we
Then ride up the flower-bordered drive of Mount Bonnell.
thine alabaster city gleam, undimmed by human tears.
As this friendly city glows in the light of the setting sun, you feel that it was always intended for Austin to be your permanent home.
One crown thy good with brotherhood.
Just a couple comments to close before I send you on your way. I do have to share with you all that you are the privileged audience to be the first to see this film in a theater since 1947. That's how long it's been since this has been shown, which is kind of cool. And I do have to mention that when we sent the film off to be preserved, the lab that was doing the restoration work, they emailed me and said that if we had waited about 6 more months, we would have lost the film completely. And part of that problem was that we were delayed with the grant process, which almost cost us the film. And if you notice, there were some sound issues throughout the film. We had to employ 3 different sound labs at different stages of the restoration to restore the audio track, because that was the part that had deteriorated the most on the film. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody for coming. We went a little bit long, but that was to keep you here downtown so we could wait for President Obama to leave, so you could leave, have safe driving home. So thank you again for coming. Safe travels. Have a good night. Thank you.
Do you know where this love can be found? Open up your eyes and take a